Hey folks, I'm Hugh. This is Jay.
Hey folks!
And welcome to the Blind Judgment Podcast. Jay, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
You're doing good?
You know, it's the end of the week. I think
is.
I'm naturally a little bit tired, but, you know, recording this podcast is always a bright point in my day, so I'm looking forward to it. I know you've been talking this episode up all week and are very excited, so I'm a little excited to hear what it's all about.
I am really excited. Yeah, so for our listeners, this is going to be kind of a special episode. We're going to kind of turn this into a series, but I'll give you a little bit more info on that later. But this case is going to be maybe a little bit different from the ones that we have covered previously. So I'm really excited to present it to you folks and present it to you as well, Jay.
Yeah, I have no idea what she's talking about. I don't know what this series is all about. So we're all going to be learning about this together.
Well, because it is a unique and special episode, we are going to forego our usual photos and we're just going to dive right in, and you'll have to be along for the ride.
All right.
Okay. So to start, I'm going to introduce you to Christina Powell, and let me just show you a photo of her really quickly. So if you look at my screen,
Okay.
so she's there on the left.
Okay, yeah, I see her.
Okay. So Christina is a 17-year-old recent high school graduate, and she is about to start her first semester of college at the University of Florida, which is in Gainesville.
Okay.
So on August 23rd of 1990, her parents help her move into her off-campus home that she's going to be sharing with another incoming freshman who is 18-year-old Sonia Larson. And let me show you a picture of her as well. I'm actually going to show you that same page, and she's going to be on the right.
Okay.
So you see there's Christina and Sonia. How would you describe those girls?
Just two brunettes. I mean, they're headshots, so I can't really tell much.
Yeah.
I got no background context here, but they look like ordinary college gals.
Just a couple of young college gals. I think that's a good way to describe them for sure. So the girls meet, their parents get them moved in, and then they say their goodbyes to the girls because they're dropping them off at school, which is, obviously a hard day for any parent. So before they leave, Christina's parents tell her to give them a call the next morning just to kind of check in, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these girls have just moved into their apartment, so they don't really have like a landline set up yet. And this is in the 90s. It's the early 90s. So there are no like cell phones. So Christina would have to find a payphone on campus to call her parents. She's like, of course, no problem. And then they leave. They go on their way. So the girls spend most of the night unpacking. They're setting up their new place. They're chatting, hanging out, etc. This is the beginning of their independence, their adulthood. So it's a really exciting night.
And a new friendship.
Yes, and a new friendship. Exactly. So at some point, Sonia goes up to her room and she goes to sleep. And Christina, she decides to crash on the couch.
This is all that same night?
Yeah, this
like
is
the first night they're...
This is their first night that they're there.
Okay.
In the early morning hours of August 24th, a man breaks into their home using the sliding glass door. Once inside, he noticed Christina asleep on the couch. He hovers over her for several minutes, but decides not to wake her. He then makes his way upstairs, and he finds Sonia asleep in her bedroom. Again, he stands over her, watching her sleep. After a brief moment of deciding which woman to target, he attacks Sonia while she lays in bed, stabbing her in the upper chest with a K-bar knife that he has brought with him. She awakens, screaming, and to subdue her, he placed duct tape over her mouth, wrists, and ankles, and he cuts her clothes off. He sexually assaults her and then stabs her as she tries to defend herself. She suffered multiple stab wounds, including cuts to her arms and a slash to her left thigh, and unfortunately, she succumbs to her injuries. Afterward, he goes back downstairs where Christina is still asleep on the couch.
Still asleep?
She's still sleeping.
Damn.
He bound her hands behind her back. Again, using the K-bar knife, he cut off her clothes and sexually assaulted her while threatening her with the weapon.
What's a K-bar knife?
A K-bar is like a long knife. It's usually like military, like you usually see it in the military. Like I think they used it in Vietnam. I guess whenever I think of a K-bar, I think of Rambo.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like an extra long, sharp knife.
Got it.
He then forced her to lie face down on the floor near the couch, and he stabbed her 5 times in the back, ultimately leading to her death. He then went back upstairs and sexually assaulted Sonia's body. He removed the duct tape and then took a shower. He then goes back downstairs, removes the duct tape from Christina's body, and poses her nude body in a sexually humiliating position. He then left the apartment.
Jeez, we're jumping right into it today.
So later that morning, Christina Powell's parents are anxiously awaiting the phone call from their daughter. So she was supposed to call. It was her first night there. So maybe she's out with some friends. Maybe she's, living her life because she's an adult. She can do whatever she wants, So they write it off. They're like, okay, whatever. So the next day, when she still doesn't call, they start to panic. They call the police, but they are not super cooperative. And they don't live too far from the campus, only a few hours. So they decide to make the drive. And when they get to the girl's home, there are all of these notes on the door from friends saying like, hey girl, like give us a call when you're home, or like, oh, let's hang out later. So they weren't like out with any friends. It's not looking good. So they contact the on-site manager of the housing complex, and they're like, you need to let us in. There's something wrong with these girls. Like we need to get into their unit, into their home. And the manager's like, okay, I can do that, but I have to have a police officer present whenever I do that. And they're like, okay. So they wait around for an officer to arrive. And when the policeman arrives, he and the Powells step into the unit. The lights are off. It's dark. It's silent. He steps inside and he calls out, Sonia, Christina. No response. The officer turns on the lights. They walk into the living room where they find the mutilated, posed body of their daughter, Christina.
Jeez.
So backup is immediately called. More police shows up, and an investigation begins. They don't know it yet, but this is only the beginning, and it was only a matter of time before the killer would strike again. So we have our first serial killer case.
Oh, I see how this could be a series.
But that's not what the series is going to be, actually.
Okay.
All right, so before we go any further in with the case, I have to ask you a question.
Okay.
Do you like scary movies?
Yes.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Is this a real question, or am I supposed to just go along with?
No, you're supposed to answer.
My favorite scary movie? I'm going to say 2013's Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Wow, I've never seen that one.
Yeah.
Really? It's that good?
I don't know. It's just the one I always think about when people ask me that question.
Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna have to watch that. I don't think I've never seen it. I mean, I've seen the original. I've seen the remake that came out in 2003 with my girl Jessica Biel.
Oh wait, it might have been that one. I said 2013, but I meant 2003. I think.
Oh, if 2003, that's a great choice.
Yeah,
it's a very good.
Yeah,
a
no,
good
that's
scary
what I
movie.
meant. Sorry,
Yeah.
2003. I mean, yeah, it's not like mind blowing, but for a scary movie, I thought it did everything right.
It's a good scary movie. Yeah. Well, as you know, I love scary movies. And it's hard for me to pick like just one that could be my favorite. But somewhere near the top of my list would have to be the Scream franchise. I watch it every year around Halloween. We actually watched it this year together.
I love Scream.
Oh, yeah. It's truly a 90s like classic for sure. But did you know that the Scream franchise is loosely based on a true story?
I remember hearing that, but I definitely never looked into it. Is that what this is about?
It is. Oh. That's the case that we are covering today.
It makes sense.
Yes, we are covering the story of the Gainesville Ripper.
Ooh.
Yes. So if you haven't seen the movie Scream, first, please go turn on your television and watch it. It's a great movie. But it is kind of like it's a modern take on like a film formula for the slasher movies of like the 1970s and 80s. And it centers around a group of high school students who are obviously being killed on campus. And now the story itself that we're going to cover today, it's not an exact, the movies are not a retelling of this story, but it is definitely inspired. The screenplay was inspired by this real true crime case.
Got it.
Yeah. So just with all of that in mind, do you have any thoughts? What do you think of this so far?
Well, yeah, given the fact that we just jumped right into
exactly
such a crazy scene.
Such a crazy scene. There's a lot of ground to cover with this one. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm looking forward to. It's like, man, if that was the start, then where is this going to take us? I'm very curious about that, but excited to learn more. I don't have any questions right now, but yeah. I guess I do have a question. Did you say that the guy went up, had sexual relations with Sophia 2 times?
Yes. So he assaulted her when she was alive, and then he killed her. And then after he assaulted Christina, he went back upstairs and assaulted her body, her deceased body.
That's crazy.
All right. Well, let's dive back into the case. On August 25th, so literally like the next day, okay, Krista Hoyt returns home to her first floor apartment after working an overnight shift at her job with the local sheriff's department. She worked in their like archives department. And let me show you a quick photo of Krista. Just one second. So here's Krista right here.
Okay, she's got big hair.
She's got big 80s hair. How would you describe her?
She looks like a very happy, maybe possibly like the popular girl in school, you know?
She's very pretty. She's got a very good smile.
Yeah, she looks, she has a great smile. Yeah, she's a brunette as well.
She is also
maybe
a
this
brunette.
killer has a thing for brunettes.
So she's 18 years old, and she is a freshman at Santa Fe College, which is also in Gainesville. It's right next to the University of Florida's campus. So this is in the same area, okay?
Okay.
So she comes home, and it's around 11 a.m. She goes into her bedroom, she takes off her shoes, she goes into the kitchen, she gets something to eat. Then she goes into her bedroom again because she's going to change into like some comfortable clothing. She just got home from work. As she starts to undress, a man emerges from her closet. He sneaks up behind her and he puts her into a headlock. She tries in vain to hit the man and free herself, but she struggles to fight him off, and eventually he subdues her. Once he has Krista under control, he used duct tape to gag her and tie her wrists behind her back. He then cuts off her clothing and sexually assaults her. He forces her face down on the bed and proceeds to stab her in the back repeatedly. Afterwards, he turns over her body and made a deep cut from her pubic bone to her breastbone and continued to mutilate her body. He wipes her down with soap and water, removes the duct tape, positions her body, and then leaves the home through the sliding glass door. That evening, Krista's coworkers become concerned when she doesn't arrive for her job. So they contact the authorities. They go over and do a welfare check. They knock at her door, and no one answers. So the police go over to the window, and this happens to be her bedroom window. One of the officers looks into the window, and he can kind of like peek through the blinds, okay? He sees Krista sitting on her bed. She's slumped over, like all the way over, and she's nude. And the officer can see that she has numerous stab wounds on her back. So he alerts the other officers, like this has taken a very, very serious turn.
Yeah.
But before he can look away from the window, he notices something sitting on Krista's dresser. And he's looking closer and closer, but it's hard to see in the dark apartment. But finally, he's able to make sense of what he's seeing. Krista's head is sitting on the dresser, facing her body.
My God.
All right.
That wasn't in this movie, was it?
What?
Scream?
What did you say?
That wasn't in the movie in Scream?
Okay, so like I had mentioned before, it inspired the screenplay for Scream.
But I know, but it's like
not
the
gonna
one
be
thing.
Exactly like
It'd
it.
be like the one thing you'd want to keep from the true events because it's so crazy.
All right. So there have been 2 killings thus far. How would you profile this killer? Like, who do you think he is? What do you think he does? What are your thoughts so far?
Seems like he knows their schedule and goes after them when they're tired.
Okay.
Is the only thing I can the only pattern I can identify at this point, right? Because the first one, they were moving all day. They were settling into their new place. Boom, he attacks. Then this one, she had just gotten home from work. And boom, he attacks. So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking right now.
Okay. Do you think you think he's been watching them? Is what you're saying?
For sure. They're not random. I mean, may have randomly chosen them, but the time he's executing all of this stuff is definitely not random. I feel like maybe there's definitely some homework that he's been doing, spying on them, stalking them, learning their routines, observing them, knowing, this is where I'm going to enter, this is where I'm going to exit, this is when I'm going to do it, all those types of things.
Okay, so you think he's watching them and he's planning it out.
Yes. And he's obviously attracted to these women because he's like doing all these crazy acts with them as well. So, yeah. Which
is crazy. I mean, like the lengths that he's going to, he's positioned their bodies in crazy ways. It's very unsettling.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very extreme. All right, so let's continue. So by this time, the murders have gained a lot of media coverage. Many students have been taking extra safety measures, like don't go out at night. If you go out at night, make sure you're in a group. Like people are really on edge because of just the gravity, just how extreme these murders were. And they're all happening to young women on campus. They're changing their routines. They are sleeping in groups. They are scared. So since the killings have happened so early in the fall semester, some students have even chosen to withdraw from their classes or even transfer to different schools altogether. Very scary time. Very scary for people who are on campus. Everyone's on high alert. And so one of those students was 23-year-old Tracy Paulus. Now, Tracy attended the University of Florida, and she was actually coming back to school. She had taken a couple years off, but she was going to go back this semester to finish her degree. And luckily enough, one of her lifelong friends, Manny Tabota, he was doing the same. And let me show you some pictures of those two.
Okay.
So there's Manny on this side. There he is. And there's Tracy on the other side.
And they're a couple?
No. So they are just platonic friends. They were childhood friends. They grew up together. And whenever she was going back to school, he was doing the same. So then they decided to just room together. So they were just platonic friends. They were roommates.
Got it. They almost look like brother and sister.
They do. They look a lot alike. So Manny and Tracy, they're rooming together off campus. And although Tracy is worried because the murders, obviously have been occurring in her area, she finds some comfort in the fact that she's living with Manny, who used to be a football player. And, he's a big guy, so he'll probably provide her some protection. On August 26th, so this is the day after Krista's murder, or after Krista was found, Manny and Tracy go to sleep in their respective rooms. At around 3 a.m., a man creeps into their home using the sliding glass door. He goes upstairs and he makes note of Tracy asleep in her room. He goes into the other room and, noticing Manny asleep in his room down the hallway from Tracy, he realizes that this is a threat, and he proceeds to stab Manny in the upper chest with his K-bar knife. Manny wakes up and immediately starts defending himself. Like, he is fighting back with all of his might against this man who is wielding this massive knife. So this commotion wakes Tracy, and she approaches Manny's room where she observes this struggle. So now Manny is a big guy, but the intruder is also really big, and he is unfortunately subduing him. So while he kills Manny, the intruder notices that Tracy has run back into her bedroom, where he follows her.
Oh my God.
Now she tries to lock the door, but he breaks it down. He overpowers her, and he tapes her wrists and mouth. Much like his previous victims, he cuts off her clothes and sexually assaults her. He then turns her over and stabs her several times in the back, killing her. He then removes the duct tape, washes her body with soap and water, positions her, and then leaves the house.
And this is all in a matter of days?
Yes, this is just in a cluster of days.
Wow.
Yeah. So what are you thinking right now?
I guess I'm just thinking, like, how is he able to get away with it? But I get,
It's just been a couple days.
I know, that's what I'm thinking.
It's a matter of days that this has gone down.
Right. So the investigations aren't really far along.
They don't even have time to collect enough evidence.
Right. That's what I'm thinking. It's like, what evidence are they finding behind at the crime scene? Like, are they completely clean? Are they finding things? Are do they not even have the time because they have to jump to a new case like every other day?
Yeah, I mean, they're trying the best that they can, but again, it's just every day is a new horrifying murder. So
I would think at this point, if the town wasn't already basically on lockdown, that it's gonna be now, and nobody.
Oh yeah, so after this one, the campus, so they put into effect this like, oh my gosh, what is the word I'm trying?
Curfew?
This curfew. Yeah. So, and they really go on lockdown for sure.
Yeah, and just stay on watch basically 24/7 until there's a breakthrough in the case.
Yes, that's really all they can do.
That last scene, though, the way you described it, just was very cinematic and put me there, and I can just see him noticing. What was her name?
Tracy.
Tracy watching everything, running back to her room, him following her, busting the door down. That has to just be horrifying.
Absolutely horrifying. And you know what's going on. This
and
is
you know what he's capable
murder.
of.
Oh,
you just saw him take down the football player.
Absolutely.
And I can't imagine that hopelessness that she felt.
It's so scary. It's so absolutely scary.
And you know what's happened a couple days before.
You know the details of the other murder. So you know what's happening, what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's horrible.
So terrifying. So after this murder, these crimes are thrust into the national spotlight. There is a serial killer on the campus of a major university. So because this case is in the spotlight, Gainesville PD are contacted by the authorities in Shreveport, Louisiana, about an unsolved triple murder that occurred the previous year. 55-year-old Tom Grissom, his 24-year-old daughter Julie, and his 8-year-old grandson Sean were attacked in their family home while they were getting ready for dinner. After the incident, Julie's body was found mutilated, cleaned, and posed in a disturbing manner. So an investigator from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement headed to Shreveport in November of 1990. So the similarities between these cases included the way that the victims were posed, the tape residue that was found on the body, and the use of soap for cleaning the bodies. So they also tested the bodily fluids from the suspect in Shreveport and discovered that he also had type B blood, which was the same blood type that the perpetrator of the crimes in Gainesville had. And this was really the turning point for the investigation. So now they've been able to connect it. It's not just happening in Gainesville, it's also happened in Louisiana as well. Not long after the detective visits Shreveport, a local resident named Cindy Jurish reaches out to Crime Stoppers, and she suggests that a man named Danny Rolling might be linked to the murders in both cities. Back in August of 1990, Cindy had caught a news segment about a series of murders while she was driving through the Florida Panhandle. It triggered some memories of Danny Rolling, who she had met at her church back in Louisiana. And she wondered about his possible connection to the Grissom murders in Shreveport. He had made some really unsettling comments to her and her husband. So apparently, they met this guy at their church. They would hang out with him sometimes. Like, he would come over for a little bit. Maybe they'd have dinner. Maybe they'd hang out. But on this one particular evening, they were talking, and Danny says to them, "I have a problem. I like to stick knives into people."
Whoa.
So at first, Cindy and her husband just kind of brushed off these remarks. They didn't think much of it. They were like, all right, he's just a weird guy, okay? But when she heard about the murders, she didn't want to believe that he would be involved initially, okay? But then she became additionally concerned when she remembered that he had also mentioned that one day he was going to leave Louisiana and go where the girls are beautiful, and he can just lay out in the sun and watch the beautiful women all day long. So where would you go to do that?
Florida.
So she could not shake the news about the Gainesville murders. So in November, she reaches out to the police, and she lets them know about the possible link with Danny Rolling. She just couldn't get it out of her head. And she said one day she just felt the urge to pick up the phone. She called Crime Stoppers and she said, "You guys really need to look into this guy, Danny Rolling." So the investigators take her tip very seriously. And they quickly track down Danny Rolling, who had been arrested on September 7th for robbing a supermarket in Ocala, Florida.
Okay.
So this robbery happened just 10 days after Tracy and Manny's killing. And at that time, he's sitting in jail only about 40 miles south of Gainesville. They were able to find out that he had type B blood, which matched the profile of the suspect of both the Gainesville and Shreveport murders. And after some investigation, they discover that Rolling had been living in a small camp in the wooded area close to the off-campus student housing. In his campsite, they find various tools, some of which had been used to break into the homes of the victims, articles of clothing, and a tape recorder with audio diaries. In these recordings, he sings and brags about being a high-profile killer on the run. So, they've got him.
He's just making his own jingles about his murders?
Yeah, I mean, he's very clearly an absolutely insane person.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's funny, we always talk about this, but these killers, they always have like a journal or a notebook, or in this case, an audio diary, where they're like, yeah, and I killed this person and blah, blah, blah. Like they're stupid. Like they do the most incriminating things.
They're always compelled to just share it. I think that's what it comes down to. Like, I did this thing, which to them, I think is a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? It's like if, you had some major accomplishment in your life, obviously you're going to want to share it. I think to them, it's like that, but obviously very dark.
It's so dark.
And obviously, I think they're smart enough to not tell a stranger about it. So they have to resort to audio logs or a journal or something like that, because it doesn't make sense any other, thinking of it in any other way. But I do always find that so interesting.
It's very, very interesting. Like they can't help themselves.
They can't help themselves.
They can't help but just spew the horrible things that they've done.
I wonder if it's almost like
a psychological thing.
Right. Like there's some level of guilt that they're trying to shed
or narcissism. Like I feel like they're completely cold to other people. They're just completely disconnected, and they have this inflated sense of self, obviously to the point where they think that they can take a human life. And so they just feel like they need to boast, they need to brag about themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's also funny that seemingly put together 3 crimes back to back to back without getting caught. And then he gets caught robbing from a grocery store.
Robbing a grocery store.
Come on, bro.
And not only that, but whenever they do some more investigation and they interrogate him, he was also, so like right after Krista Hoyt's murder, he tried to rob a bank, but it went wrong and he ran off. So he was just committing a whole slew of crimes within this week period.
So was he unemployed? Did he have a life?
Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about this douche. So let me start off by showing you a few photos of him.
Does he have crazy eyes?
Well, so this is very interesting, and let's talk about this. I think whenever I look at, especially this picture here, doesn't he kind of look like the ghost face?
Yes,
mask?
I was just thinking
like,
that.
Look at the eyes and the mouth. He looks like the ghost face mask.
Which is the mask in the Scream movies.
Yes, I'm sorry. That is the ghost face is the Scream killer. That's the face that, I feel like everyone has seen that face. Everyone knows what that is, but he kind of looks like it.
No, he totally does. I can 100% see them being inspired by that photo that you have. Very sad. Like if you just showed me that picture without any of this context.
No context.
I would think like he's a parent of a victim.
Totally.
In the courtroom, just devastated by the tragedy that just happened to his daughter or something like that. But no, it's the complete opposite.
Well, because whenever you hear just the monstrosity behind these crimes, and then you see the picture, he looks like a derp, you know?
Yeah, he
just
goofy. Looks like a very ordinary dude.
Yeah.
The one in the top right where he's what is he
he's
swearing
an oath? In. This is when he's on trial. Yeah.
He definitely looks a lot more sinister there.
Oh yeah, for sure. He is very.
Actually, he looks like he can put on different, uh, like faces, like because there's such a wide like one of those pictures he looks very sad and like a dad, and the other one he does look like a cold-hearted killer.
Oh yeah,
So he has like a wide
100%.
range of expressions there, and maybe he used that to his advantage. I don't know.
I think he did. I really do. I think he did. I mean, we'll get into his backstory here in just a moment, but yeah, I think he's able to wear many faces. All right. So Daniel Rowling was the younger of two sons that were born to James Harold Rowling and Claudia Beatrice Rowling. Claudia could be described as petite and brunette, which I think is very interesting because what did his victims look like?
Petite and brunette.
Very, very interesting. So, his father was a Korean War veteran and he served in the US Navy. He also worked as a police officer in Shreveport. He also had an extensive history of abusing his wife and kids, and he especially targeted Danny, like since the moment that he was born. Now, there was one particular incident where his mother, Claudia, she ended up in the hospital after claiming that James forced her to slice her own arm with a razor blade. So yeah, so he grew up in a very, very toxic environment. Now, as he grew up, Danny found himself in trouble with the law many times for robberies in both Georgia and in Alabama. And he was even arrested for being a peeping Tom. As an adult, he was never really able to fit into society and keep a steady job. He worked like a series of odd jobs to support himself, and he moved around frequently. He also had a string of bad luck. I mean, surprise, surprise. There were many times where he was arrested for domestic violence charges. And he claimed that he had this alter ego, this like other version of himself that he called Gemini. Unfortunately, because he was a Gemini, he's out here making all of us Geminis look bad. Okay. I don't know why he's doing that. But just a really deeply disturbed individual. So now in November of 1991, he was formally charged with 5 counts of murder. However, his trial was not set to start until 1994. Now, Rowling's this like absolute piece of shit, and he's living for this attention. And he expressed his desire to become a superstar like Ted Bundy. And he is wanting to like get a book deal so he can tell his story. So one of the ways that we know so many details about these murders is because he talked a lot. Okay. He talked a lot to people in the media. He did a lot of interviews and he would go into great detail about these crimes. He's just, really just a piece of shit. So now when he was in prison, he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and paraphilia, which is where you're like attracted to like inanimate objects or like objects that are not like sexual. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So in 1994, just prior to the start of the trial's beginning, and now keep in mind he was charged in 91, it's 1994 now, he shocks everyone by pleading guilty to all charges. And subsequently, the state attorney proceeded on to the sentencing phase. Now, during the trial, they do this interview, and this was a very interesting part of the story. But his mom does an interview with Court TV, and while she's trying to do this interview, his dad is in the background, like absolutely screaming his head off.
What?
Yes, like a freaking lunatic. Like he's losing it. So if that's any window into
his upbringing,
yeah. So on April 20th of 94, Rolling was sentenced to death. And in October of 2006, Rolling was put to death by lethal injection. Now, before he was put to death, he was able to get like a last meal, you know? And he requested it to be this absolute like 5-course meal, lobster, steak, the whole nine. He had only a couple bites of it and then had them throw the rest away. Before he was put to death, he said that he was not at all remorseful for the crimes that he committed. He sang a song to himself, and then he was put to death.
Wow.
And that is the end of the story. That's all I have for you.
And so that was 2006 that he was put to death. When did the Scream movie start?
1998, I want to say. 99 or 98.
Wow.
Yeah. So what do you think of this story? What are your thoughts?
It's just terrifying. I know serial killers like this are very, very rare, but you always hear about them every once in a while, and they're enough to just always, I don't know, just scare you, like, oh, there's people out there who are just insane and are capable of so much destruction. I don't know. Like, it's just
to terrorize these people. Yeah.
It's just usually, plot in a movie, right? And it's never real life. Or you want to imagine that it's never real life until you hear things like this. And it's just like, man.
Yeah. It's like life imitates art.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy. And it is terrifying. Again, like it's just one of those cases that it's like you can't even believe that this really happened. It's so dark. It's so horrifying. Yeah.
Did they ever find out, or did he ever talk about why he posed them?
I don't think I've never found any information on that detail, but I would say, judging whenever I read the way that they were posed, I would say it was to further sexually humiliate them. And this is what Dr. Hugh thinks. She's going to psychoanalyze. All of his female victims were petite brunettes, and his mom was also a petite brunette. I think he had some true hatred for his mother and like some true hatred for women. But all right, that's just my assumption.
Yeah.
I'm not here to say anything. I have no credentials. I have no room to speak on it, but that's just what I'm going to say.
And they never like found any pictures, because I was thinking that initially was like, maybe he's posing them and then taking some pictures for records that he can kind of take with him to remember these crazy crimes, but I would assume they would have found those.
He wants to, I think he did it just to humiliate them. You can cut this out because this might be a little bit too graphic for our listeners, but the way he posed them was, and these were not Krista, these were the other 3 women that he murdered. He put their arms above their head, so their breasts were completely exposed. And then like the legs were bent at the knees and then spread to the side. So they were completely exposed. So I think it was to be in death further to sexually humiliate them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't make sense, but...
No, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, like I had mentioned in the beginning, this is going to be the start of a series. And the theme of the series is going to be crimes that inspired movies.
I like it.
So that is what we're going to be doing.
I have a chance of knowing more about those cases than cases that don't have a movie tied to them. So I'm excited.
Exactly. I'm really excited. The next one, I think you're really gonna like. It's a movie that I showed you and I really love, and then you ended up loving it as well. You had already seen The Shining long before.
That is your favorite movie, though.
It's my favorite. This is actually, the next crime is going to be about my second favorite movie. So you can probably guess what it's going to be.
Dang, I don't know what your second favorite movie is. I'm sorry.
Do you want me to tell you?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
That'll ruin it.
That it's not blind judgment.
We would have to change the name of our podcast.
Hint judgment.
Minimally informed judgment.
Oh, come on. All right. Well, that's all that I have for you for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate each and every one of you. And we will see you on the next one.
Yep. See y'all later. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.